Welcome to the SDA Housing Podcast, brought to you by Ndis Property Australia. Before starting this episode, we need to provide a general disclaimer. Information contained in this podcast is general in nature only. It does not take into account the objectives, financial situation, or needs of any particular person. You need to consider your financial situation and needs before making any decisions based on the information in this podcast. And you should consider seeking independent and professional advice for your personal circumstances. All right, let's begin.
Hello everybody, my name is Min and I'm your co-host with Debbie from Ndis Property Australia, and you listen to the SDA Housing Podcast. Australia explains, highlights, guides and brings awareness about all things SDA in this ever-changing Ndis world. Good morning, Debbie.
Hello, Min.
Today is the 4th of July.
It is the 4th of July.
Wow.
Happy 4th of July to any American listeners.
Independence Day, hey?
Yeah, although it's not the 4th of July there yet.
Independence Day, what does that mean? Independence from...
Is it the 4th of July? I'm not sure, actually.
It is.
From the War of Independence?
From the British?
Yeah, in the 1870s, 1880s.
So we don't care about the Americans, do I? Today we have another war, a war on conflict, a war on referral fees. Debbie, today's episode is about the open letter from Katalin, who owns the business called Hand in Hand Sport Coordination. She wrote a very detailed letter and she's sent it all to ministers and parts of government. And I'd like you to definitely read it word for word, Debbie, just from top to bottom, I guess.
Yeah, I will. So, of course, Katalin has been on a couple of our episodes in recent times. So thank you, Katalin, for allowing us to talk about this. So I'm going to read this long letter, word for word, dated the 24th of June, 2025, to the Honourable Tanya Pilbasek, MP, Department of Social Services, the Honourable Jacinta Allen, MP, Department of Health, Louise Glanville, National Disability Insurance Scheme, Ndis Quality and Safeguards Commission, the Honourable Bill Shorten and Rebecca Folkington, National Disability Insurance Agency, Ndis Social and Health Worker colleagues. Dear representatives, as an active member of the Ndis community, we have the privilege to stay involved in all aspects of our participants' journeys. Through this function, we aim to highlight a significant barrier to optimal Ndis funding utilisation, referral fee payment practices. This submission seeks to provide recommendations and enhance quality service benefits for all discharge and referral parties, with a particular focus on Ndis participants. By addressing the adverse effects of long-standing client referral fee incentive payments, the submission will highlight areas for quality improvement with minimal cost to Ndis provider governance and significant benefits for patients, participants, as well as the NDIA and state healthcare systems. The little talked about fee payment referral system, where payments are made by providers such as Ndis core or capacity building businesses to referral parties, example hospitals, government staff, or Ndis support coordinators, originates from an area before the Ndis legislation. Since the implementation of the Ndis Act, these little addressed payments have been negatively affecting our participants and carry significant concerns for our industry. Receiving and, in some cases, demanding additional fees to facilitate referrals throughout the process chain, thereby encouraging discharge to willing providers. This process is both unethical and creates unreasonable expectations of future income. The outcomes are negatively affecting participants and their Ndis funding. The Ndis Task Force has initiated notable discoveries in the past year to identify and expose dubious Ndis providers. However, it has yet to dismantle the above-described process chain sufficiently. There is much more to be done to discourage the behaviour and promote the NDIS's initiative of getting the scheme back on track. The Getting the Ndis Back on Track initiative has been focusing intensely on price caps and individual funding levels in line with reasonable and necessary funding. Whilst this approach is valid and favours capping expenditures, it fails to address the undue fund utilisation by third parties. Referral fees across all health and government services, specifically affecting Ndis participants exploring the paid referral pathway. As part of the discharge process, when a patient or participant is ready to leave hospital or government system, a staff member, generally a discharge officer or social worker, guides the participant in preparing for a successful transition of care. The participant, with the aid of support staff, identifies a suitable provider and care handover is to commence. Notably, the hospital or government-funded support network holds a significant level of influence over this process, as patients and participants rely on expert and unbiased guidance from a trusted institution. Introducing incentive payments negatively affects the discharge and ongoing quality of recovery by limits the provider pool and only favours providers who are prepared to honour the referral fee payments. Negatively affects the NDIS scheme's basic principle of market competitiveness in favour of less than desirable providers' business conduct, disturbance of market competition by an unregulated party, distorts the focus from the best interest of the participants to the best interest of the referral person, prioritising the most significant benefit available, commission payments, compromises quality standards to favour individual monetary benefits instead of fulfilling contract KPIs, obtaining payment for the same tasks twice across two different payment pathways, double dipping, builds and enforces unrealistic and sharp practices as the recovery of prepayment as well as potential ongoing payments are to be budgeted into the cost of care. These costs are claimed by the newly appointed NDIS provider, which further distorts the NDIS fund utilisation scheme. A service gap between funded and received care by NDIS participants. The appointed provider is unable to deliver the level of support deemed reasonable and necessary due to unregulated and unchecked additional expenses. Erosion of ongoing NDIS service quality with a lack of enforcement on service delivery and the greater likelihood of returning to state hospital care. Please note that this publication does not suggest that all referral discharge staff are involved in referral fee payment. Rather, it indicates that the market for this conduct is still large enough to impact our industry. A small number of individuals in key positions have a tremendous adverse on-flow effect. Proposed actions to curb this deeply ingrained behaviour for both NDIS and other health and social care workers. NDIS-registered organisations could be immediately and directly affected by addressing the conduct and desired quality of service by the NDI and NDIS Commission regarding the practice. The recently implemented language around conflict of interest guidelines as of June 2025 is a positive step in this direction. More stringent conflict of interest registration self-reporting reviews as part of the auditing process. The enforcement of standard requirements and the implementation of mandatory registration for SIL and support coordination organisations has been a welcome development. To further improve the process, the recommendations of the ASIC directors' checks for the past 10 years should be considered, as well as the ongoing renewal of checks every 5 years thereafter. This low-cost implementation proposed for NDI's business directors will uncover any current and past director appointments that the Commission should consider as part of the registration renewal process, creating an easy-to-use system to encourage reporting of referral fee payments. The NDIA and the NDIS Commission's task force is to familiarise themselves with the practice and obtain training to investigate and recommend remedial actions or fines to uphold best practices and NDIS service standards. Recommendations to safeguard the NDIS participants and support disability sector governance standards for other social workers and healthcare professionals. Education of staff on best practices and required service standards in line with hospital department policies, highlighting the erosion effects of referral fee acceptance for ongoing quality of service on NDIS participants' recovery pathways, as well as outlining the importance of quality of care delivery to support long-term independence. Creating and circulating corrective actions as found reasonable by the establishment with the request of registration of any first, second, or third level conflict of interest relations. Monitoring referrals made by discharge staff and other practitioners to enforce hospital and department values, as well as the quality of service delivery. Readiness to enforce conflict of interest and ongoing quality of care service delivery standards. inclusion of employee application requirement checks of directorship by the ASIC registry in the past 10 years to scan for NDIS organisation ownership, first level affiliation by managerial and senior appointments and candidates. Suppose ownership or direct relationships are discovered for the applicant staff member. In this case, an appointment should be made with awareness of this potential conflict of interest, and ongoing monitoring of this relationship should be established further to support the safety and quality of service delivery. A past 10-year ASIC registration directorship check for all key employees involved in discharge functions to be completed as part of a renewal of employment contracts, as well as every 5 years thereafter. As an organisation aware of our industry referral practice and having made a conscious decision to prioritise quality of care over sharp and dubious contacts since our establishment in 2019, we aim to encourage all colleagues to support our goal of providing quality care for all our community members. I appreciate your time and look forward to continuing to support our participants. Sincerely yours, Katalin Jakus, Director of Hand in Hand Support Coordination. That is the letter.
Wow. Thank you, Katalin. We need more people like you who stand up for what you believe in and have high ethics and values and are uncompromised in this world of NDIS, which is so easy to be compromised, I guess. The key word to this open letter, in my opinion, is really referral fees, conflict of interest. But going back to some foundations of the NDIS, which is participant safety and choice and control. Yeah. And I'm sure all our listeners and all the people in the industry would agree that a conflict of interest should always be avoided at all times. And is the industry fully 100% not conflicted?
Of course not.
Probably not. Because when it comes to money, what does it matter? It's just money, right? Debbie, what are your thoughts after reading all that?
Look, there's a few things that just really pop up, and that is all around the ethical side of this. Yes, the conflict of interest is huge. Compromising participants, the erosion of professional integrity, reduced quality of care, the fact that this may favour certain participants or groups and therefore increasing inequalities. Also, I thought that this potentially would, when you're talking about referral fees, there's probably some kind of collection of use of participant data, which is, privacy and confidentiality risk there. And you're going against the NDIS Code of Conduct. So, yeah, it's unethical. End of the day, that's what it is. And I think that there needs to be some kind of process brought into the NDIS systems to manage this. And obviously, Katalin has put forward some proposed actions to address this.
I was on my last podcast episode with Katalin, that'd be about a month ago. She said something that surprised me. She said some support coordinators out there, they charge commissions and they take commissions and extra margins from, that's the way I remember her explanation to me. So I'm sorry if I'm wrong here, my interpretation, but they really charge big money and get referral fees internally in the client's funding as extra income to themselves, which obviously drains the participants' funding.
Well, that's very much part of what she said in the letter.
Yeah, and that surprised me. I didn't realize that was actually happening. Yeah, I'm glad that she's brought this out in the open. I believe in what she's saying. We should not people in businesses in the NDIS should not be conflicted by money. And at the end of the day, conflict of interest is because of money or business interests. Can you imagine? And it's to our listeners here. Can you imagine? And this is actually true too, by the way. Can you imagine providers poaching other providers' participants by offering cigarettes or pizza or food or computer games? Hey, buddy, come over to our house over here. Join our group home, and we'll give you pizza every night. We'll give you cigarettes every week. How's that sound? Come over here. Just sign these documents, and you'll come over to our business model over here. And then when obviously support coordinators and claim managers and providers, care providers, look for the missing participant, the defense on the other side is, well, they've got choice of control. They're about to choose their new provider. So they come live with us now. And that's because of enticement, money, other incentives. That right there is incentives and conflicts of interest, and call it bribery because it is bribery. That is what this is all about. Now, well, not necessarily about bribery, but any taint of money that should not be given, asked for, or provided is literally a referral fee and is a conflict of interest. Now, I'm going to go off track here, Debbie, because this is a very important, what I'm about to explain right now. Bruce Bromley, who's an SDA assessor, he reached out to me about a month ago and asked me, he said his words were, "Hey, Min, you did a podcast a year or 2 years ago about referral fees and participants in Sydney. Can you please provide that to me so I can actually share that to other people?" And Debbie, you and I have been trying to find this Sydney episode and I can't find it.
Mm-hmm.
So luckily this topic here is about the same topic. So I want to talk about this very incident that I had. I was in Sydney probably 2.5 years ago. I met a guy called Chris he's a mortgage broker. I think it's rate money, in Fairfield. When I was walking around Fairfield, I count every 5-10 meters, provider shop. I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, I'm walking around Fairfield here and I literally counted 30 plus provider businesses in the same precinct. They're walking around. I could not believe how many I saw. And I was just surprised. But then maybe 8 months later, I caught up with a friend of mine, a builder called Joe. And we were having a shisha in Sydney for lunch. And I was talking about how much I was surprised with 8 months earlier about these participant provider businesses all around Fairfield. And he said to me, "Min, do you know what really happens down here?" I said, "No, I don't." And he said, and this is relevant for Bruce Bromley here because Bruce has asked for this information. He said to me, "They sell their family." And I said to him, "What do you mean sell their family members?" And he said, "Imagine a guy walks into a shop, a provider business, and says, hey, buddy, my niece, or my nephew, whatever, has $500,000 a year in their funding. If I can get him to sign with your business, I want 25-30% cut of that." Now imagine that number there, 30% commission on the entire $500,000 that they have to pay as a regular referral fee over to that family member. Debbie, what's the implication of this transaction, Debbie?
Oh, I'm just horrified to hear that because you haven't actually told me that information, Min.
Well, it was on my podcast. You should listen to it, Debbie.
I don't remember those numbers, my God. Well, obviously the implication is that is reducing that participant's funding and therefore the amount of care, the quality of care that they're going to be able to be given.
By the way, that's a low number. The actual number is 50%. $500,000 to $1 million, they ask for 50% commission on that entire.
There's a reason they've got $500,000 in their plan because it's needed. It's required. It's only given in the plan if it's deemed reasonable and necessary to provide the care that they need. If that is halved, and that's a massive amount of money that's no longer in their plan, this is unbelievable that a family member would actually do this.
And Debbie, this is not a one-off incident. This happens all the time, everywhere in.
Are we talking about certain communities here?
Yes, I'm not going to mention areas. Already mentioned Fairfield, but I'm not going to mention anything else. I don't want to be targeted for racial profiling here. But I mean, there's a reason why there were so many 30 in one street, 30 in one little section of a community. And there's lots of communities out there that I don't want to say lots, but I asked Joe, my friend, I said, "Is this a one-off?" Because this happens all the time everywhere in Sydney. Everywhere. And I said, "So what, 200,000 to $1 million? Yep, all the time." So back to conflict of interest. This is the extreme level of conflict of interest. I won't say the word referral fee. I'll call it a bribe. It is a bribe, right? And there are I won't say so many, but there are providers out there who are happily playing in this world of paying off each other, family members, for the privilege of poaching participants from another source and then absorbing it and then paying out these referral fees. Now, that's exactly what Bruce Bromley asked me to find in the podcast. So I couldn't find it because we have too many podcasts. But I'm repeating that same story right now so that because it relates to this whole conflict of interest and money here, and it does. And Bruce wanted to hear it, and here you are, Debbie. I'm just lost for words here. And unfortunately, the NDIS should have a hotline where people can ring up and whistleblow against these people. But the sad thing about this whole story is, Debbie, is the provider would say, yeah, I'll pay you 50%. Well, they'll negotiate back and forth, probably end up 35-40%. They'll pay the money for 6 months or a year, but after that, they will stop paying the money and not renew the agreement. But they've absorbed they've taken the participant away. So they're all just backstabbing each other down there. Yeah.
I mean, this is obviously an extreme example, of how these sorts of unethical payments severely affect the participant at the end of the day. But even small referral payment fees, and when I say small, I'm probably still talking about in the tens of thousands. That's what it does. It is affecting, at the end of the day, the person who loses is the participant. The people, organisations who lose are those such as Katalin's who are ethical and are not getting the business that they so rightly deserve. And it just undermines everything that the NDI scheme is about.
Debbie, about 5 episodes ago, we talked about the cocoon scandal. Then you talked about the internal bribery.
Absolutely.
You want to refresh our listeners?
Yeah, two sides to that. One being that there was incentives paid to staff.
How much?
I think it ranged between sort of $3,000, $5,000, $10,000, depending on the amount of funding, i.e. how much support the participant needed. So a very high needs participant, i.e. with more funding, would be like a $10,000 referral fee to the staff member for bringing them on board with Cocoon. There was also, in some of the articles we read, talk about participants being bribed with, as Min mentioned earlier, pizza every night and cigarettes to come and sign over and live in their house. So obviously it was a situation rife in the Cocoon world.
So, the signs of conflict of interest where it might harm a participant care would be biased service options, pressure to choose certain services, lack of transparency, where the conflict is not disclosed to a participant, inadequate informed consent, single provider controlling multiple supports. Now, Debbie, let's talk about that. A single provider controlling multiple supports. An example would be what?
Support coordination, plan management, SIL.
Care, SDA care.
Yeah.
All that under one roof.
And there's plenty of providers out there who do have registrations for all of those different supports.
In our world of SDA, Debbie, we know that a lot of the big SIL providers, the Arumas, Life Without Barriers, maybe Endeavour Foundation, all the big ones out there. I mean, they were the legacy original, the OGs of the provider world who came into the NDIS a long time ago, and they were given both the SIL and the SDA registrations. But even they don't really want to.
They don't want to be the SDA.
Yeah, they have no interest in being a property manager SDA service. They have no interest. Their core business is literally care, right? And even still, Debbie, they also work with other external support coordination services. Well, sometimes their own internal, but external support coordination.
The really big ones at those organisations you've mentioned, I think, do a pretty good job of separating out those different brands within their business.
Yes.
But there's a lot of smaller ones that try to do it all or want to do it all.
And when you try to do it all, you're not giving the participants choice and control.
No, not at all.
You're trapping them into your own service, And a lot of participants, Debbie, they're non-verbal. They can't communicate.
They don't understand
choice. And they don't understand choice.
Yeah.
So
that often leaves it up to the family members or if they're under the OPG to just try and negotiate what is being offered by a provider and what conflicts are there.
I want to read a comment I read from somewhere else here. A support coordinator also providing direct services of care. If a support coordinator is also delivering direct services to the same participant, there is a risk that their recommendations may be influenced by their own business interests rather than the participant's best interests.
Absolutely.
There you go. So all these points I've just raised earlier here, they all highlight the importance of transparency, disclosure, robust conflict management to ensure the participant care is not compromised by these providers. Debbie, in our previous life in the financial services world 20 years ago, we had to adhere to the ASIC rules of conflict of interest, soft dollar commissions and other interests there. And in the world of ASIC financial services, you have to declare in writing if there's a potential, not breach, but potential conflict where it's common sense that there's a conflict. And as long as you disclose it in the world of financial services, that's all that matters, right? So in these words,
it's obviously very heavily regulated, and we know that the financial industry.
Whereas here, the NDIS world is not regulated. It's a code of conduct. When it's not really regulated, the code of conduct is skipped around on the outskirts, and it's really easily bending.
Yeah.
The players' rules, I guess. The playing field, I guess. Yeah.
Now, look, I guess with the financial industry, it took a long time for those regulations to be adapted and tweaked so that they worked and they were what was needed. NDIS is still new and it's got a long way to go to get there, but it really does need much more regulation of companies operating in the space, because this is why it's all falling apart at the moment. Falling apart, I'm being a little drastic, but we are seeing so many providers going out of business because they can't continue to operate in the current climate with the crackdowns from the NDIS in terms of payments of monies, delays in funding payments, amongst many other issues. And so the NDIS are trying at the best that they can do at the moment in managing all the issues, but it's got a long way to go.
I think that I could be wrong here. The NDIS really polices the registered providers. Is that true? Let me rephrase.
Well, how can they really?
Let me rephrase the question to you.
Police an unregistered provider.
So we have 22,000 registered providers in Australia, 300,000, and I read this online yesterday, blinked in here, 300,000 unregistered providers. So my question to you is, I don't know the answer here, Debbie. The question is are those 200,000 bound by the Code of Ethics of the NDIS Code of Ethics?
I don't know the answer to that question. I would imagine that
they're not registered.
They're not registered, but simply the fact that they are providing services to participants who've got NDIS funding, that they would be bound by some ethical requirements.
I want to read the words here. I've read.
But it's probably not legally.
Hey, let me read this. Yeah, you're right. The NDIS Code of Conduct explicitly prohibits workers and providers from giving, asking for, or accepting inducements or gifts, including referral fees, that could influence support decisions or compromise participant choice. Such practices are considered unethical and may lead to regulatory action, including investigation, penalties, or loss of provider registration. Considered unethical, not considered illegal.
Yeah.
Any provider practice that commodifies participants is not supported by the NDIS Commission or the NDIS Code of Conduct. Now, a new word I've learned today, commodification. I've never heard that word before. Debbie, commodification of vulnerable participants. What does that mean to
us? Just turning them into a commodity. They're not people anymore.
They're a
money-making machine.
Yeah.
And that's the core of what is wrong with this aspect of the NDIS and the fact that this referral fee system is still operating. You're right. It has commoditized participants, turning them into an object.
Look at all those articles we've talked about in the podcast the last 3 months, Debbie. Cocoon and Haroon and the other guys. I mean, they were registered and they're still commodified their participants and fraudulently operated, ran their business like a real money-making machine. Let's just keep it simple. And now they're out of business because they've been caught out by the task force.
Yeah, well, look, I think that kind of covers most of the aspects that have been brought up in this letter. We're going to make sure that there is access to a link to download this actual letter if you wish to read it.
We'll put it on our website, Debbie.
Thank you very much, Katalin, again, for bringing this out in the industry. Very important topic and subject, very timely for sure. And let's hope that we do get some movement from the various ministers and departments to try and address some of these issues and find action points that are actually going to work.
So I guess I want to add 2 pieces of information I've got to talk about with regards to those incidences of those conflict referral fees. And this is very important to understand and acknowledge here because it's pretty bad. In the Sydney market, support coordinators are renowned for taking bribes for the referral allocation of SDA participants to SDA housing. Now, can I throw some numbers at you, Debbie, and tell me whether you're shocked with these numbers? If SDA providers go to support coordinators, which they normally do, this only happens in Sydney, by the way, they ask for if they have any participants for SDA housing. And the support coordinators often say, well, what are you going to pay me for that as a procurement fee? Well, we all know it's a bribe, but let's call it a procurement fee. And this is the going rate, Debbie. For HPS, it's $20,000 for one person, right? For an FA, fully accessible, it's probably $17,000. For an IL, $10,000. That's the going rate for this bribe/procurement fee for the support coordinators to refer participants to SIL providers or estate providers for SDA housing. Now, what are your thoughts on that?
Gobsmacked?
Well, I mean, in their defense, Debbie, they're going to call it a procurement fee to actually procure the participant for.
Well, how many procurement fees do there have to be for a poor participant who just wants to live in their own home to get there?
Yeah, I know.
What about for the investor who just wants a tenant in their home?
There's a dark side and a bright side with this. But they can argue in their defense, well, if I've got to go out there and find the participant and deliver it to you, blah, blah, blah. There's my going rate. Yeah, cool. But when they actually say, unless you pay me that fee, I'm not going to help you. And that's when it becomes a bribe.
Yeah.
I mean, do you call this a bribe or do you call it a procurement fee? I mean,
no, that's a bribe. That's very clearly a bribe. If there's a threat involved of not delivering, yeah.
And right there, they're not acting in the best interest of the participant.
Of course they're not.
No way. And this kind of behaviour is rife in Sydney. I've never heard of this outside of Sydney. It's always in Sydney. Now, back to the earlier discussion about the Fairfield, all those shops I mentioned about earlier, Debbie. I've got to say that the workers in these provider shops, businesses, they actually stand on the road, on the footpath and say, "Oh, good morning, good afternoon, sir. Do you have any family members who are on the NDIS?" They actually give pamphlets and flyers out and actually jump in front of people to ask those questions to find business. That's what they do.
Wow.
And then they say, "Well, what are you offering?" Well, if you refer us your family member, did you want to sign up to our provider business, our care business? We'll pay you 20% or 30% or whatever the number is. And obviously that will drain the first that year's 12 months payments until it's renewed again. I mean, these are the conflicts of interest that exist, and that actually does operate in plain sight, well, behind closed doors in the NDIS scheme.
On the street.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, look, there's probably more cases going on.
Of course.
Throughout the country in different areas. They've got their own little schemes that they're running.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it's all going to become more evident as we spend more time in this industry, as these cases are starting to become more obvious to us.
And, I want to give a soft, weak conflict of interest as well. Recently, Debbie, we've been doing a lot of research and analysis of houses, group homes, SDA houses, apartments, Even we ourselves are learning the whole challenges in participants' best interests. I mean, I want to ask you the question, Debbie. If a provider retains, entraps, controls these participants in these group homes and not give them choice to control, is that a conflict?
Absolutely.
What about when the support workers and the provider knows they should be living in a new fit for purpose house and don't let them go off to somewhere else? Is that a conflict of interest?
Yep.
What about if they should be living independently by themselves in an apartment complex, but they won't because they make more money having them in a house, a group home, to make more money? Is that a conflict?
Yeah.
Because I ask this, Debbie, and our listeners, because we, as you all know, we work in the apartment space for SDA, and we're getting so much, we've always had so much resistance in the last few years.
From providers and support coordinators.
When we thought, is it because they just, they don't want to play in the open space of choice control, or is it because they don't make enough money? I mean, but Debbie, is it right? I know it's not right, but they don't make enough money to warrant it's not financially viable for them to actually go off to a apartment complex to look after one participant in an apartment for 6-7 hours for drop-in supports.
No.
I mean, is that enough defense to not give someone choice of control if they don't make enough money to do that? Is that a conflict right there, or is it not?
That's a tricky one because, they've got to make money to have a viable business. And, no one goes into business to lose money. But at the same time, you've got to be doing what you can, the interests of the best interests of the participant at the core of what you do. And if that is not giving them choice and control over where they live, there's got to be different ways of running your business brought into play.
If they can't do it or too far away, they should pass the participant on to someone else who can deliver that service on site in the apartment complex or someone nearby in that community. I mean, that is the solution right there.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be about money.
And look, the good providers that we speak to, they do that. If they can't look after a participant who wants to move to a different location or whatever the circumstance is, they say to us, look, of course, we will find a new provider to look after that participant if we can't continue to manage them to within the participants' needs and requirements, we won't hold on to them for the sake of holding on to them. So there's plenty of providers out there doing that, but we know that there are providers not doing the right thing, and they are holding on to the participants, not advising their clients, their participants, of their rights and the fact that there is even such a thing as this choice in their own housing, the home and living supports. I'm sure, as we know, so many of these participants have got some form of cognitive disability that hampers the way they understand things around them. And if they don't have very close family members to help them understand this or sort of be there on their behalf to look after these issues, they're at the mercy of these providers.
Yeah. So anyway, what is we covering next?
Any last words, Min?
No, I think we've said enough on this topic. It's pretty deep topic here. Yeah, we can only hope that the NDIA, the NDS task force, the ministers of government, this becomes a very big topic in the future. I mean, look, there's a big, There's a big change happening in the NDIS 2.0 process. And
yeah, and I'm just wondering, I just thought about that, the whole review, NDIS review, which is 18 months plus since that came out. I don't actually remember much being talked about the referral system in any of that. It wasn't touched on at all, which is interesting.
I mean, it's in the code of conduct. It's on the NDIS website. It's all there, but
it wasn't brought up as an issue.
No, is it being really policed? Well, no. I think the biggest issue here is the growth of the NDIS. Try and maintain it down to 8% or lower, not the 14% growth, which is getting out of hand, and the stability of the NDIS. That's the important thing here. And with all the cutbacks, Debbie, the price reviews, the lack of IL participants being approved, the lack of SDA participants being approved as well since the last 3 years, we're going through a major shake-up of the NDIS. And I think this very topic here is too small a topic according to the NDIS.
Given the bigger picture of everything they're having to deal with at the moment.
We can only hope that this is brought to light. Brought to light in the community, and we will talk about it. And just being aware of it makes you think twice if you're a provider or a participant, whether you're in a conflict of interest transaction, and just think better. Don't be tainted by the dollar, by the financial benefit.
That's the wrong industry to be in if you are.
Do the right thing by your participants and by the participants, Don't put them in harm's way. Be honest, be transparent, and disclose interest. So if you're going to refer as a support coordinator a participant to your sisters or your family members' care provider business, tell them I'm disclosing my conflict of interest here. You're free to choose anyone else if you want, but my recommendation is very, very good. I get nothing out of it. I actually get no money out of this referral fee, the referral. So say it. I mean, let's be honest, if you are getting a referral fee, actually state those words. I hereby declare in writing that I actually am getting a 5% introduction fee for this transaction. If you declare it and they're okay with it, it's all disclosed. It's where you don't declare it and you make a financial gain and it can be seen as you doing the wrong thing. That's where the provider is or the referrer is in jeopardy here. And that's where you'll be called out by the NDIS Code of Conduct. Yeah?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Debbie.
Thanks, Min.
All right.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please make sure you are subscribed and following us so you can keep in the loop with all of our upcoming episodes. We would really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star rating, a written review, and to share this podcast with those that could benefit. Until next time, catch you on the next episode.